Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Mimir's Council Live. Now, we've got a bit of an interesting discussion tonight, but also one that has been discussed everywhere. We're talking about coronavirus and COVID-19, as it's also known. We recently released a video here at Mimir's Council called Lockdown COVID-19 Manufacturing Consent. In that video, we went over quite a few of the stats that have been released by various governments across the globe and broke them down a little bit, took a little bit of a deeper look at them. And if you haven't watched that video, I highly recommend it. We put a lot of effort into it. But it was originally going to be a much longer video, and we are working on a few separate parts actually. But we decided to split it up just because it was such a big topic. We've also decided to do some live streams with some of the guys that helped me research it, namely Steed and Eadric, and I'll introduce them in a second. And also we have the mythical Rhys with us tonight, who is the editor over here at Mimir's Council and Mimir's Brunner, and also has a lot of input into the scripts and what we say and what we talk about. But like I say, the documentary that we released, or kind of mini documentary on the statistics, was meant to be a larger one. And this is what although we are going to make more professional productions on those other aspects, we do want to, like I say, talk about them a little bit more casually amongst friends, about some of those aspects that we missed out and some that we covered in that video. For example, we might go into the digital authoritarianism, as exampled by China, which not as many people are talking about in its full spectrum. Also, we're going to do a little video, we'll hopefully get it out at the beginning of next week sometime, about these week 14 death statistics from the UK that people are sharing to prove that COVID-19 is a deadly killer, which, as we show in our, or as we try to present at least in our video that we released last week, I believe it was Thursday, that might not be the case. And it's the same with these week 14 death statistics. A nice little spike on a graph looks very impressive, but when you dig into it, you find quite a few anomalies that don't quite make sense. But I'll save that for that video, or we might get into the discussion of it a little bit tonight. But as there's four of us tonight, I don't want to spend too much time with this introduction. So I'm going to bring some people in and just let them introduce themselves a little bit first. Like I say, these people, everybody you see here tonight, were involved in the making of our last video, and it's something that we're going to be working together on for a bit. As I said, we've got a few more projects in the works. So I'd like you to meet them. So first I'll bring in Steed, as he's a close friend of mine, and he helped with the research, as I said, for the last video, and he's going to be helping with the research for the future ones. So hello there, Steed. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Good evening, mate. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Yeah.
Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit? I know that you've appeared on a few other shows recently as well.
Well, just one really. I was on a stream with Thomas, Spade, and Rhys, discussing broadly this issue, and particularly kind of trying to offer some kind of counter to some of the arguments that various figures in the movement, the dissident movement, are making. But yeah, I mean, just a brief background is that I've been involved with mainly English nationalism for about 15 years, and not so much in terms of having obviously I don't have a YouTube channel or anything like that, but I've been a regular on various blogs, forums, things like that. I ran a blog many years ago called Eye of Woden, and yeah, I won't go into too much detail. That will suffice, I think.
Yeah, well, it's good to have you here. And I know him personally, and he's a good friend of mine, and he's very intelligent, and he knows a lot about the subjects we're going to be talking about tonight, and that's why I've invited him on. And like I say, everybody here was involved in the last video. So I'll introduce next Eadric. Hello there, mate.
You all right, mate? Good evening. How's it going?
It's going great, mate. Now, for any American listeners, Eadric is a Scouser. He's from Liverpool, so hopefully you can understand him okay.
Yeah, I'll try and be as clear as it can be.
Do you want to give a little introduction, mate? I know you're not very well known on the scene and you're in the background, but I know you're just like Steed. You're a very intelligent guy and you helped with the research here for this documentary that we did and our future documentaries. So if you want to just say anything about yourself that you think people might be interested in, please go ahead.
Sure, I've been about for a while online, but not really publicly active or anything like that politically. I've not been, I'm not a YouTuber or anything like that. I don't really like social media and things. Been about for maybe 10 to 15 years in terms of keeping up with politics and being politically. But as I say, I'm not really a public speaker. Don't make videos. Don't do any of that. I've felt as though most of the time when I go to talk about something, there's already somebody else talking about it and doing so from my perspective. But I feel like this issue that's going on right now is quite important. And it's been a thing that's made me think it's time to sort of get involved and speak up a little bit. So,
No, I agree with you for sure. We'll get on to the next introduction and then we'll get into the discussion. Now, the next one is a bit of a special one because Rhys has been working with me for a long time now. And this is the first time he's appeared on a stream or anywhere, really. So, how you doing there, Rhys?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. A little bit nervous, but should be a good show.
No, you'll be all good, mate. So do you want to give yourself a little introduction? Although I did a little bit there for you.
Yeah, I haven't been too public. Just for the last few years, just really looking into things and sort of use my skills somehow to try and help get the message out. And I found Phil, and we have a very similar worldview, and it was great to work with someone who who is better at communicating these ideas and stuff, but me bringing my my video skills and stuff. And
Well, some exceptional
Yeah,
skills
good.
there too, mate, by the way. And we get a lot of praise for them. And he definitely turns my words into something a lot more than they are. It lifts them a little bit. But yeah, well, we get on to the discussion now. Obviously, tonight we're going to be discussing COVID-19 like nearly everybody else. As I said, it's a big topic. And the reason it's a big topic is because most of the world, or nearly half of the world at least, is on lockdown. We're in under house arrest at the moment. And one of the things I know we've been discussing amongst ourselves while we were researching together and just in general as we're friends was how we found a lot of the so-called dissident right or the nationalists or whatever you want to call them have been actually supporting this lockdown. It's shocked us a little bit. We found it a little bit confusing. People that we supported and looked up to, and we found a lot of false dichotomies. So we're getting, you either love the economy or you want to save lives, and there's no in between. And if you want to go out, then you just want to go to malls, etc. Blah blah. We're going to go over them a little bit, but I'm sure people listening here have probably heard a lot of these arguments, and I hope at least that they're a little bit as troubled by them as we are. Now, so tonight we're going to go into that a little bit. So I'm just going to, because there's four of us, it might get a little bit chaotic, and I don't want to put a strict structure on the chat tonight. I want it to be quite a casual one because we are making the more formal videos that would deal with it in a more condensed and slick way, I suppose. So does anybody want to kick off first with anything, as I've talked a bit now? So does anybody want to start this discussion with something about what they feel about so many of the so-called dissident right and the social and the ethnic nationalists amongst us supporting this lockdown? Yes, Steed. Sorry, mate.
Yeah, I'll go if you like. So one of the things is, a lot of the particularly the kind of third positionists and that in the nationalist and dissident movement, one of the things they'll criticize the likes of, the kind of individualists like Sargon and that for is they'll say that, these people are working on the basis that all that matters is having a good argument. A good argument will win out in the end. And that's, the entire kind of political discourse in the Western world is just reliant on who's got the best argument, who's got the strongest argument. and whoever has, they'll win. But then the same people that will criticize those and will call for collectivism and things like that, they'll also say we should be using this COVID-19 situation to further our cause. But they're forgetting that there is no rationale here. There is no rationalizing with the state in terms of saying your globalist policies have caused this. It's not the best argument that's going to win out. It's about who holds the power, and it's been incredible to see that people have not these same people have not. It's like a cognitive dissonance there, and that's one of the main things that I find incredible about it, because ultimately, the likes of us four here tonight, and hopefully some of the listeners, we know that this is about who has the power and how those people are trying to galvanize their power.
I think it's worth pointing out when you talk about that, literally today, it might still be live for all I know, but it's probably ended by now, I would suppose. There is a live event going on across various streaming services being ran by Global Citizen, which is called One World Together at Home. And some of the world's most powerful corporations and international businesses are the big sponsors of this kind of thing, including, the likes of Vodafone and Cisco and IBM, loads of big businesses. And the people performing are some of the world's sort of biggest and most famous pop stars and professional sort of paedophiles like Elton John. All of them. I can't think of a single pop star that isn't doing this. So when people talk about, the fact that we can use this to our benefit or whatever, and point out the fact that it's internationalism or globalism that's resulted in such a natural and easy spread of this apparent virus, I feel like they're kind of missing the fact that the people who have the power here and who are capitalizing off this are those very same internationalists themselves. Again, Global Citizen literally called that One World Together at Home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that. And I was having a quick look. I've only been drawn to that tonight, so I'm not an expert on it yet, but it's definitely pushing this global idea. And one of the arguments that we've seen brought out is the collapse of the economy. Now, although I have always maintained, and I will always maintain, that there is never going to be a full collapse. We're not going to go to some primal living in the woods like some people think, where the society is going to completely go into like Mad Max style scenario. But we have seen collapses before, and such as in the 1930s and the Great Depression. And anybody that's looked at the Great Depression in any detail knows that the only big winners of that were big business. Big banks, in fact, was that the main attack there was on the middle banks. There were many of them in America. So these smaller banks, they were all wiped out pretty much. And now we have these super global banks took the power from that. And I believe that if there is the global recession here, as I mentioned in the piece that we put out, lockdown, COVID-19, manufacturing consent, that I'm sure McDonald's and KFC and all these fast food joints and all these big corporations like Asda's and Tesco's here in the UK, these big supermarkets, and all these big shops like Primark, etc., etc. They're all global, not multicultural, although they are, but multinationals are going to be there after this has all died down. When COVID-19 will all release, it's going to be still there, and the people that are not going to be there are those on the high street that were already suffering under this globalist government. With these big multinationals. So I don't really understand that argument. But carry on, Eadric, sorry.
I'll go ahead. I was just going to say, whilst you're talking about these big businesses and things like that are making strides in this, when it's the smaller business damaged. I think it was maybe a week ago or even less than that, Amazon announced that they were hiring like another 100,000 people or something like that, at least in the UK. It's just so obvious that these big companies are the things that are benefiting from this. It's definitely not going to be, anybody who wants to be, making little like their own small businesses and things like that. It's not those people people that have been doing well at all.
And another thing with this is the idea, and I do want to touch on this because this is kind of a false dichotomy here, a straw man argument, if you like, that if you don't support the lockdown, then you're for killing people, and if you want to go out, it's just about the economy. Has anybody got anything to add on that? Because that's something that really kind of frustrates me when I see these kind of really narrow focused arguments.
Well, as you went over in that first documentary, the first video that you uploaded a few days ago, it depends on, you know, how you interpret what's actually going on. There is very good reason to believe that there aren't anywhere near the kinds of deaths that these people are describing, you know, actually happening. There's all those videos of New York hospitals where they're claiming that we've got all these people who are dying and whatever, but when you see the footage, it doesn't look like that at all. It looks like the hospitals are empty. You've all seen what's going on there, and with sort of, it was on Twitter, I think maybe a few days ago, there was a hashtag trend, and it was like, go and look around your local hospital kind of thing. There was even a guy in the UK who was actually arrested and is apparently potentially going to prison for 3 months for having knocked about his local hospital. There's all sorts of reason to believe that what they're describing when it comes to the deaths is massively, massively over-exaggerated.
Yeah, I mean, that was the main focus of our first video where we looked at these numbers in detail. But even if you did believe that, I mean, the idea that a crashed economy wouldn't affect the poor is kind of ridiculous anyway. As if, like, the only people that need an economy in a country is a big business. I'm a small business. I know many people that are, and we're heavily affected by this. And it's not because we want a flash car. I certainly don't live at any high standards, that's for sure, like as in flashness. Or
Yeah,
carry on, Steed. No, go for it, mate.
Yeah, when nationalists criticize people who, you know, put the economy first, we're doing so from the basis that existence, you know, life is not about finance. It's not about material gain. It's about other things before that: family, folk, culture, the environment, all of these things. But what's going on, you know, in the wake of this this so-called pandemic? It's not just it's not even turning that on its head at all. It's not suddenly putting everything else first.
No.
And anyone who's criticizing it is calling for a return to prioritizing finance. It's because those who put finance first, those who really truly prioritize finance in this world, are going to be fine regardless. When, you know, we talk about the economic impacts of this, it's not because we care about the economy. It's because we care about the average man who is, I mean, all of us, I'm sure, have personal acquaintances, friends and family who are suffering, you know, deeply from this. I do myself. And you know, to straw man someone who cares about that as being someone who just cares about the economy is it's intellectually dishonest. And yeah, I agree with you. It really gets my goat as well.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great point. Like I say, the people that suffer. I mean, I think I heard of a friend of mine in America that Taco Bell are giving away tacos at the moment. I mean, they're using it as an advertisement ploy at the moment. They're not worried, this big business. And like you say, I had a little bit of I'm probably a little bit too tired, but somebody on Twitter was kind of saying that he was. I made a little comment that I was shocked at how so many dissidents were now supporting house arrest. And he said he was shocked about how so many dissidents couldn't live without their governments for 3 weeks. And I told him that was a bit of mental gymnastics to say that not wanting to be under house arrest was somehow not being able to live without my oppressors. But then at the end, he basically said that he's got a family and he's at home and he's fine. He's doing more than me and I could do in my more. So the assumption was there that because I wanted to go out of my house, I don't want to be under house arrest, the assumption then from him was that I just want to go to shop at a mall or a shopping centre, as we saw in this country. And this is what I meant about the false dichotomy. It's got to people that they're so narrow focused that, like you say, well, the reason I want to go out is because I want to do moots with my heathen group. I want to go out to the woods with my children. I want to go camping with my children. I want to experience the outdoors like I'm supposed to in this beautiful weather in spring. I certainly don't want to be stuck in a moor or go to the arboretum in the local town by me, etc.
I mean, even besides the
Ed.
point as to, you know, whether or not you want to go out for this reason or that, whether it's going to the shops for that kind of reason, or it's for more valid reasons like wanting to be out enjoying the spring and things like that. The fact of the matter is that they're I've just completely lost my train of thought.
I think I get where you were going to go there. I might help you out. You say we should be allowed to choose if we want to go out anyway, right? Is that where
yeah, but I mean, it's also the case that it's under the assumption it's making the baseline assumption the fact that people are in fact definitely dying en masse in a way that is unprecedented and unlike ever before. So they seem to assume that, you know, you want to go outside and do something regardless of the reason because one, you're selfish, two, you're ignorant, and three, you don't care about people's lives and well-being. But like that's assuming that this is actually the case, that people are dying to the kind of extent that they're claiming they are, or even dying in any unusual way at all.
I mean, even if we take the numbers, though, I mean, H1N1, something I should have mentioned in the video, claimed way more lives and was considered little more than a harsh flu. And I mean, like, we're talking 100 times more lives. I'm not sure exactly. I think it's 500,000 or 5 million. It was a massive amount that died from that. Nobody, and I have my suspicions about that one, but what I'm saying is, even if we say both of them are real, even if we accept their numbers, like I said in the documentary that we did, it's still not enough to shut down our nations. Put me under house arrest, which is for now in the UK, for the Americans that might not be aware, we had a 3-week lockdown and now we've gone another 3 weeks we've been given, where they will reassess again. So there's no guarantee that it will be over by then.
Well, that's the way that, you know, they treat prisoners of war and people taken hostage.
Yeah.
You know, when like people are taken hostage in like Iraq or Afghan or something like that, they don't tell them when they're going to be letting them go back, when they're going to release them. They say, oh yeah, we're going to let you go. Then a week later, they're like, no, actually, maybe another week or maybe another week.
Psychological tactic, yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to say about like the deaths and things like that, and even if we take it at face value and assume that people are dying in unusual numbers on top of the expected deaths for, you know, every individual week of the year or whatever, let's assume that people are dying unusually, like that extra 6K that they said was in week 14. Even if that's the case, what have we got to say then about, you know, people's grandparents who are living alone at home and they're terrified for a start. They're washing their hands all day, every day because they're scared that this evil virus is going to come and get them and they need to scrub their hands till they're fucking red raw. Like there's people whose grandparents are at home and lonely and isolated. And if you're an old person, that's not good for you.
Well, yeah, that actually brings us to something that we're going to be doing in the shorter video that deals with the week 14 deaths, because I've been looking at the stats, and even if you take them at their word and say every case that was even suspected of being caused by COVID-19 was actually caused by COVID-19, you still have nearly 40% of those extra deaths, which is 6,000 extra deaths for that time of year. So 2,600 extra deaths that even by their own statistics don't show up as COVID-19. Now, what else is causing them? Well, I looked into this a little bit, and the troubles of isolation, as Eadric was pointing out, stress and isolation, especially abrupt isolation. Well, just to put a little quote that I'm going to put in the video, a woman, I forgot her name now. She did a massive meter study. She took all the data from 1980 to 2014, all the studies on the effects and side effects of isolation and loneliness. She concluded after this massive piece of information. This is a woman that has addressed Congress as an expert, etc., and addressed the Australian government as an expert. So she's not just some nobody. And she basically concluded that isolation, especially abrupt isolation, and especially in the elderly, was as deadly as obesity, which, just to put that in context, obesity is the second biggest killer in the UK, or leads to illnesses of killer. And when we add the fact that the Italian study said that nearly 50% of all the people that died had 3 or more major health issues, which was actually backed up recently by the Office of National Statistics in the UK, where they did a study on 4,000 people that had died of COVID-19 and concluded that on average, the people that died of COVID-19 had 3 other major ailments. We can start to see that a lot of these deaths could be caused by actually the measures taken to stop the deaths. And I will put that through on a case in a little bit of in the smaller video that we hope to get out at the beginning of this week, backed up with studies and looking at the numbers, because I've seen a lot of people throw this week 14 death spike, and we've seen it in the media saying it's COVID-19, but even by their own statistics from the Office of National Statistics, where they're getting this spike from, even by their own admission, nearly half of those deaths are not COVID-19 related. Half of the spike, that is. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to that, because I went on a little bit of a rant there.
I think you covered it all, to be honest. I just wanted to say that, I think all 4 of us, obviously, we worked on this video that came out recently, which hopefully everyone's going to go and check, because we put a lot of work into it.
And we've got a lot of work already put into an upcoming video where we're going to talk about digital authoritarianism, just to put it out there. So there's been a lot of work in the background here that the people haven't seen yet. So carry on, sorry, Steve.
No, I would say to those people that want to believe that this virus is a serious threat, I would say to them, when they say, those who are calling for an end to the lockdown and an end to the police state, which is effectively what we're living under in many countries, they'll accuse us of being selfish because we're putting our own civil liberties in front of anything else. But I would say to them, civil liberties is not just a selfish thing. There's a principle involved there, and it's a principle which all of our ancestors have always fought for. What is life? Is life about the number of breaths you take, or is it about the quality of your experiences? If they said to us, right, this COVID-19 is going to keep returning every year, therefore, sorry guys, but Western culture is going to change indefinitely for the rest of your lives, probably for several months of the year. You're going to have to quarantine yourselves. The police are going to be roaming the streets, checking on you. Your neighbours are going to,
which they are saying or hinting at.
Sorry, they absolutely are. Yeah. So if they say to us, right, there you go, you can either do that, or you can live as free human beings and risk this, whatever this natural disaster might be. I've got to say, I think that most of our ancestors would always have taken the second option, because when you think about every war that's ever happened, your leaders are going to say to you, right, you've got 2 choices. You can strap on a weapon, you can march to the enemy, you can face them, you will probably die, or you can sit at home, probably not die, but your life is going to be very different in the future. Which option did they take? They always took the former.
That is a great point as well. People are willing to die many times over in the past, 100 times for that.
Yeah, for principles. Yeah. They were willing to risk their lives so that their kin, their children, their descendants could live as human beings are meant to live. And we are now being told that it's more important that we don't live how we're meant to live, so that we save every life possible. It's a completely antithetical point of view.
Oh no, I completely agree. One of the safest places you can probably live, right, is in a padded cell, having meals delivered to you 3 times a day, with nurses on hand. But do you really want that existence? Do you know what I mean? You got no chance of being hit by a car, no chance of and that's what we do to people that are insane. I mean, and this is the problem. We're being treated as if we're being treated as if we're not intelligent enough. When it first started, and they were saying, "Oh no, well, we're just going to have to deal with it, etc." We had people begging to be locked up. Now they're not begging for themselves to be locked in their house, because obviously they can make that decision. Anybody can say, "I believe that something outside is dangerous." If there was a march going through your town, you can say, "I don't want to go out. I'm going to lock my doors. I'm going to stay inside." Or you can choose to join that march. So all these people that were pressuring governments to lock everybody down, they could do it themselves. It was perfectly in their power to do so. So what they were actually doing is saying, we want to lock down people that don't want to be locked down.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you were to use your own common sense, let's say this thing actually is definitely a highly dangerous virus, which even going back to before the lockdown actually began, they started to say that they don't think that's the case. There was a .gov website. It was mentioned in the documentary.
Yes.
A .gov website literally said this is no longer a highly concern. I think it's high concern infectious disease or something like that.
Yeah, it's I forgot now, but
Yeah,
HCID.
whatever. Yeah, HCID, whatever that is. You can use your common sense, even if that was the case. Just use your common sense. They're literally asking us to live our lives like the boy in the bubble for the sake of not spreading this thing that there isn't really all that substantial evidence is actually any more dangerous than, like you mentioned earlier, swine flu or bird flu,
Yeah.
or even the ordinary, seasonal influenza.
Exactly.
There's a reason why in our homes, and we need to kind of untangle what that is. And in my opinion, it's looking likely that they're going to keep this going as long as they can, probably until at least September, before they start to introduce things like mandatory tracking, and then eventually potentially a mandatory vaccination, which may in fact come with either a total proper digital ID in the form of who knows what, or what Bill Gates was calling I think it was a digital certificate or something like that. If you remember that, I think it was on the 13th of March. It was quite a while ago.
Yeah, HCID stands for High Consequence Infectious Diseases.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it.
So I see a couple of people in the chat are saying I'm a bit quiet compared to everyone else. Trying to speak closer to my microphone, so hopefully that's helping a bit.
It sounds good to me. It's hard to. There's 4 people. It's always going to be a little hard to balance everybody, I suppose. I'm sorry for that, but that's just the nature of having 4 people on a stream a little bit. But no, I obviously, and you started to move the subject there a little bit, Eadric, and that's okay. I want to move on to those things. To this digital authoritarianism, I mean, and we're not lying when we say this, but we're people, well, especially me, before I put things out, I like to fully research and fully understand. I don't want to be the first to put it out just for the sake of it. In case I'm wrong, I like to give the information I give properly. But we've seen a lot of articles now that talk of apps, phone apps for tracking. I mean, this is something that we were speaking about probably well over a month ago, if not 2 months ago, when we first heard about this. And that will be included in a future video where we really detail this, because I've done a lot of research as of these guys. Now, and one way this is linked to COVID-19 is there's been a lot of praise for countries that did this. Even China got praised actually by the World Health Organization. But one of the countries that had almost no outbreak was Korea. And they instantly, because of their smart city technology, which is essentially big data or the Internet of Things. You may have heard of these terms. Could instantly get this app out, which warned people of their coronaviruses, etc. So the app basically acted as if you went to the shop, it would tell you if somebody could have been there that was later found out to be carrying COVID-19, and then it would warn you that if you went in there, basically, you could end up becoming on lockdown. So it was selective lockdown of people that either had COVID-19 or with it. But this is all done by an app. This is a tracking app that tracks exactly where you're going. And now we're seeing this talked about pretty much across the board in every country. So I want to know if any of you guys have got anything to say on that. And Rhys, do you want to join in a little bit? I know you're a little bit shy. And
well, the thing is with that app is they can already do that in our countries. They can already track us and monitor monitor us, but it's kept hush hush. So with these apps, it's sort of just a way to kind of get mass consent that it's acceptable to collect this data on us and to willingly give it to them.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a
Yeah.
good point. There's a lot of, I mean, people don't realize that even silly Facebook apps will have access to your Facebook profile, have access to your private messages in some cases. Um, so people give this information, and just to highlight that point there, I mean, Google were working with the University of Southampton on developing an app, and they already had all the data they needed, all the tracking data they needed to already track COVID-19 across the UK. How? Because people had already agreed to give them that tracking data by downloading apps from their store. So the tracking data was already there. But the difference with smart city technology or the Internet of Things is this gets crunched. It gets a corporate and government crunch of data. So they can manage everything from traffic lights to people movement. Automatically, it's heavily influenced by artificial intelligence. And sorry, Rhys, carry on, because I know that this is an area that you've got more expertise on than me anyway.
Well, it's probably more of a centralization of databases because they are collecting all this information. Like everyone's phone sends out a MAC address, and that goes to a database at Apple, goes to a database at Google. But probably with this whole situation and these apps, they're going to start centralizing everything and giving more easier access to each other's databases because the same technology is used as in our countries as what China has. We have the same capabilities here, and they go to databases while they might not be as centralized. We know, like, well, I'm sure our intelligence has direct access to those databases, even if they're split between different corporations.
I think it's worth pointing out here as well, whilst we're on this subject. I think Steed mentioned maybe earlier today an email that went round from Vodafone to people who use Vodafone for their network, their phone network. I'm just going to try and pull up the actual screenshot of the email, because it talks about exactly how how they intend on doing this sort of thing. And I think it's relevant to what we've just been talking about there. So they said in an email again that went round from Vodafone to Vodafone users, we've teamed up with Imperial College to launch our new Corona AI project within Vodafone Foundation's DreamLab app. This app harnesses your smartphone's unused processing power while you sleep, effectively turning all participating smartphones into a data crunching supercomputer that could help find a cure for COVID-19. Help. It could help. So please download the app, charge your phone every night, and help fight the coronavirus. Lovely.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fact that both Google and Apple are developing
Oh,
apps.
Steed, your voice is breaking up a little bit there, mate. Yeah.
Is it breaking up? Is it? I did actually change microphones.
Yeah, it's just distorting from. I think the volume's too high, so it's just distorting rather than.
Hold on, let me.
Yeah, it sounds like it's peaking a little bit. Whilst Steed is sorting that out, yeah, that Vodafone thing. In fact, it's worth pointing out, Rhys, that over in Australia they've been pushing quite hard with the tracking software, haven't they? And they'd intended to. They said if we don't have sort of 40% of the population of Australia pick up this app and use it voluntarily, then we'll have to enforce it mandatorily. They then went on to say that they're not. But is that going to be the case? It's hard to say. There is good reason that they're going to good reason to believe rather that they're going to do a kind of soft enforcement, whereby, for example, you're going to have a hard time going to flying a plane or applying for a job or anything like that if you don't have this kind of software and you're not participating in this. Basically, you're going to be cast out of society in some way if you don't consent to these kinds of more intensive tracking than what we already have. Like you pointed out a little bit earlier, we've been getting tracked in many ways for quite a long time now, at least since we all started using smartphones.
Yeah, well,
they're using.
Sorry, go, Rhys.
I was just going to say they're using a similar app in Singapore, but there hasn't actually been that much of a take up. I think only. I don't quote me, like maybe like about 10% or something.
Yeah, and Singapore actually then got an
20.
outbreak.
Yeah.
Whereas Korea
Oh, did
didn't. Yeah. Singapore was praised at first, and then they actually got an outbreak later because there was lack of, and they blamed it on the lack of uptake. Just as an interesting point there. Sorry to cut you off, but that just to explain what was going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Is my microphone okay now? Is
Yeah.
that sounding all right, lads?
Yeah, that
that's
sounds
fine to me.
good.
Right,
Sounds
back to
good.
normal. Yeah, I was just going to say earlier, I was trying to say that Google and Apple are both developing apps that are going to run concurrently with the NHSX app or tie into it somehow. So, when Google and Apple are talking about apps, you know that's not going to be voluntary in the end. You know that these companies are experts at forcing these things in through the back door. Every article you read about this talks about how they need at least 60% of people to be using this for it to be effective, and they're not going to go to the effort of creating these apps if they don't have a way of ensuring that enough people are using them. So I think it's naive of anyone to think that they're not somehow going to be incentivizing their use.
Incentivizing their use is probably the best way to put it, because it's going to be the case probably that if you don't adopt this tracking app or whatever else, they're going to be saying you're not going to be able to access this or that. Then if people start leaving their phones at home and things like that, there is some reason to believe that they could say, well, these tracking services aren't working very well because everyone's leaving their phone at home and going out without it in order to avoid being tracked in such a manner. So we might need to implement digital ID or something to that effect in order to get around this, so that people can be monitored in such a way, without even having their phone on them, in order to save lives, for your own good.
Another thing, normalization. This is now called nudge theory for anybody that wants to look it up in human behaviors and human behavioral sciences. Where what it is they have to get you to accept something, they have to slowly make it, normalize it. It's got another name, which I forget its technical term now, but where essentially they change your belief. So before the event, you believe X, and after the event, you believe Y. And that allows them to move forward. And this is openly practiced, by the way. Nudge theory and behavioural sciences are openly practiced in places like the NHS and government. Carrot and stick kind of type to nudge, and message framing. You've probably heard it all before. These are not secrets. But just to pull back a little bit on a point that Steed made there about NHSX, just to tell people that, because they may not have heard about it. NHSX is a kind of digital extension of the NHS here in England, which is our National Health Service. And it was only created last year, and it already has a budget, an annual budget of 1 billion plus local council funds on top of that 1 billion. And it is created almost exactly for the scenario that we've seen with COVID-19, although it was created at the end of last year, just to put that out there.
Also,
I think that app's being. I was just going to say that app's being developed by Palantir, which is run by the. He was in the top 3 guys at Microsoft. I forget his name.
There was a little bit of speculation. I did do research into that, although that was reported by many media outlets that Palantir were involved. They actually denied that they were in the end, and they were working with another big company whose name I forget now, but is heavily funded, is a big vaccine company actually, who deals with vaccines in the third world and works hand in hand with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
It's called the Grameen Foundation. I think Rhys pulled that up when we were
doing
No,
there's a different group.
A different one again.
Yeah, okay. There's a lot of groups involved.
Yeah, there's a few of them. Yeah.
They all have the same people at the end.
Yeah, they've all got their hands in each other's pockets as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So is anything else? I mean, we've been going an hour now. We could go another half hour if that's all right by everybody. I don't know how everybody is for time, or we can go a little bit longer.
That's fine. It's fine with me.
Yeah, I'm happy to keep going.
Fine.
So before I try and pick up another subject, is there any subject here that somebody wants to add to that we've already talked about, or a subject that they think is important and make sure we don't miss it? Please bring it forth.
Just to tie off the last points we were making, people will have heard about Bill Gates' involvement in all of this. but it probably goes deeper than most people realize. How many, Bill Gates has funded the Imperial College of London to an enormous degree. Companies like Vodafone, which we just mentioned, Johnson and Johnson, who are involved with this what's it called, this global together thing, whatever it is. What's that called, Eadric?
What was that called? It's
Like the concert thing, the people that were
yeah.
doing this big concert.
Yeah, it was globalcitizen.org or who
One
is running
world
it
together at home.
Yeah, One
Yeah.
World Together at Home, and it's Global Citizen in collaboration with the World Health Organization, funded by the likes of Citibank, BMI, and all the rest of these
Johnson
people.
and Johnson, who have also
Yeah.
received massive funds from Bill Gates. Bill Gates has obviously helped fund the World Health Organization as well. So all of these, people will say, oh, none of this is state policy or anything like that. But when you've got some of the biggest global corporations all being funded by the same people, and those people are the same people that are talking about mandatory vaccinations, digital ID, it's you've got to look a lot closer. You can't dismiss that as just kind of business.
I think it's worth pointing out. I think it's worth pointing out while you're on that point. There's an article on Politico called "Meet the World's Most Powerful Doctor, Bill Gates." So you can Google that if you're in the ever want to have a look at that. There's a little segment of that article states his sway has NGOs and academics worried. Some health advocates fear that because the Gates Foundation's money comes from investment in big business, it could serve as a Trojan horse for corporate interests to undermine WHO's role in setting standards and shaping health policies. Now, it's worth pointing out that back in 2019, before the first recorded death, officially recorded death at least, was recorded in China. So I think that was on the 26th or 27th of December, just after Christmas. About a week before that, he tweeted out saying that he's excited for the prospects in terms of vaccination sales going into 2020. Going back to before this, Microsoft, who obviously we all know Bill Gates was the founder of, Microsoft announced a partnership deal with MasterCard, I believe, where they said that they're going to be working towards digital ID, universally recognized digital ID at that. Which, when it comes to this whole global citizen, one world together at home thing, which looks a lot like Live Aid, it's a little bit suspicious.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as the listeners will probably be able to tell, us four have been looking into this stuff for quite a while. So when you have a lot of figures in the dissident kind of movement and the nationalist movement who are talking about, they're saying that they're on the fence about this, or they're acting like they have a take on it when quite obviously they don't. That's what's been frustrating to see, because for me personally, just speaking for myself, when this so-called pandemic hit, everything became clear to me, because I've been looking into stuff like the Chinese social credit system for a while, all of the kind of digital stuff that's going on, the mandatory vaccinations, which the health secretary was talking about late last year as well. All of these things, they all fit into the puzzle, and this is kind of this virus is the linchpin, really, that brings it all together. And that's why the four of us are so kind of impassioned to speak about this, and what really brought us together to expose it.
Yeah, and I mean, vaccines are something forced vaccinations. A lot of people, when they think about forced vaccinations, they either take the pro-vax, anti-vax stance. But one thing that people rarely take is the freedom to choose stance. That I can choose what chemicals go into my body.
My body, my rules.
Yeah, my body, my rules, right? But when it's not their body with those, but it's funny actually that correlation can be made. But and what goes into our children's bodies if we're forced to vaccinate? Because, as I said this before on another stream, but the only people that are forced medicated are either prisoners or the mentally ill, and at the moment they're treating us like both. So
yeah, good point. I think it's worth. Oh, do you know what? I don't even know what I was going to say then. I had a point to make a moment ago. I had a point to make a moment ago about that. Oh yeah. So I mean, one of the reasons that I've been concerned for a long time about sort of Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, sort of sustainable development goals of the UN and things like that. In a lot of ways, it feels as though what they're pushing for with this virus scenario and the potential for forced vaccinations and things like that going forwards is achieving their goals for those apparent sustainable development goals for 2030. It looks as though in many ways they're looking to develop sort of AI and tech integrated, highly densely populated megacity regions across the West in the US and so on. And it feels in a lot of ways though, as though what they're doing right now is an effort to sort of hurry that along and try and achieve their goals as soon as possible. And this kind of links back into, how nationalists are interpreting this situation. It concerns me in a way when I see people saying that this could be good for nationalism, when it feels as though this is more like a consolidation of internationalist corporate powers and the push towards those kinds of 2030 sustainable development goals where they want those mega city regions that are probably going to be administered by a kind of centralized, almost
smart city internet of things, AI. I mean, this is a point I wanted to bring up at the start, actually, but I forgot to, about how nationalists are happy for this authoritarianism because obviously they're pro-government. Well, if I was a right-wing pro-government individual in communist Russia, I wouldn't be arguing that the communist Russian government would have more power. I mean, this is the kind of problem that I have with that whole idea. Is these governments, these Western governments, have proven time and time again, that they are hostile to the ethnic majorities in their nations. You can try this just by putting up a poster of "It's okay to be white" anywhere in the UK. And if the police see you or you get reported, you will be arrested for putting up a poster that says it's okay to be white.
Well, never mind that. Directly related to this whole situation, they've got that NHS advert that was on, I think it was The Guardian, as well as potentially other places as well, saying "You clap for us now." And it was on about how, clap for the brown people and whatever else who run the NHS, apparently, even though the NHS is 80% white and probably mostly native. Very, very pernicious and sneaky.
And that's another thing. All this clapping, and we've seen they're talking with that "You clap for us" now. It's promoting all of these foreign workers that are in our NHS, that I think they even say in the video that they cross seas for us or oceans or something. And I'm like, they broke the law to get it. And now they did it for us. They didn't do it for themselves. They did it to save us in working our NHS. Now we're seeing as well that they're bringing over foreign workers to pick our fruit, even though I think we had about 40 or 50,000 British people apply for those jobs, but they weren't qualified enough to pick the fruit and the potatoes.
Yeah, we weren't smart enough.
So they had to charter a plane from Romania. And how is this? Because I've seen the argument made by a few within our circles, shall we say, that have argued that we should be trying to use, like you said earlier, to try and use it to our advantage and go with the normie stance. But there's also the element of truth, that we must stand by our convictions, as you said, Steed. But as well as that we can see how it's been used. We've got this stay at home together. It's completely looking to as this, bringing the whole world up to our level. Now, we know that when you want to level the playing field, it doesn't bring everybody up. It normally brings most people down. You've got to understand how many billions of people are on the poverty line. Steed, please carry on.
It doesn't matter how obviously this exposes the lies of the neoliberal globalist order. The fact of the matter is the neoliberal globalist order holds the whip hand, and they're able to come out quickly with videos like "You clap for us now," which immediately support their narratives, that support their globalist narrative. So, our kind of, nationalist kin can talk about using this to our advantage. But the fact of the matter is, it's no more. We're no more in a position to use this to our advantage than we were to use the Rotherham grooming scandal to our advantage, because we don't have the power. And by supporting these police state measures, we're handing even more power to the people that want us gone, to the people that oppose everything that we stand for.
I completely agree. They have the mass media, mass power. Like you say, they can produce videos that would take us a month to produce within a day, and probably and get more exposure to it than we could get in a lifetime. So when they can use it, like you say, produce these videos in a matter of days to support their narrative, and people will go along with it because they've already created this mentality. Go clap for your NHS. Look at all these brown NHS. Go clap for them. They go clap for them. That is what I was trying to say about the nudge theory, right? That's where they come in. Now, you might have been anti-immigrant before. Somebody, just an average person, was like, I don't like these immigrants here. Now, after coronavirus, it's like, well, they did help us through the coronavirus. And it would have changed opinions. Yeah. So, and they're using it. We can't, like Steve says, ideas are kind of impotent with no power behind them, as I believe you mentioned in the tweet. But yes, Rhys, sorry about that.
If the government's apparently incompetent, why do they just keep going along with the UN agenda, like all across the world? It just rolls out in front of our eyes. And with something like this, it just completely ramps up.
Yeah, and that's a great point.
Follow suit.
A great point as well is this idea that our governments are incompetent. It's something that really knocks me, because I was talking to Steed about this, and as Steed rightly said, that's more dangerous than anything. If you believe our governments are just incompetent, you believe that you're somehow superior, you've somehow got some superior intellect than somebody that was educated to lead from birth at Eton and in Cambridge or Oxford. You somehow figured out where they're going wrong. That's a very dangerous belief, because that makes you believe that they're just messing up. And if they could just hear your superior view, they change their view. Well, they're not, I hate to tell people this, but they're not messing up. There are no accidents. Multiculturalism is not failing. It's failing for us, but from their perspective, it's a massive success.
They want you to think that that's the case, though. When it comes to, them being incompetent, it's almost like a bait and switch strategy when it comes to this coronavirus situation, for example. Go back maybe a month ago or something like that. You had Donald Trump in the United States saying, we want to get the country open by Easter. We want to get everything back to normal by Easter. And this was used in a way which resulted in medical experts, or whatever they wanted to call them, these medical experts coming out and saying, well, if you do that, all people are going to die, so you can't do that. And then the people who think that they're smarter than these politicians who are so dumb come out and say, oh yeah, you can't do that. You definitely can't do that, because all these people are going to die. So you need to lock us in our homes in order to save.
They're playing us like a fiddle, and the fact that people can't see that is amazing. And to speak to the point that people think that they're just incompetent, that's easily disproven with one simple observation. Every government is being incompetent in exactly the same way. What are the chances of that?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That's a good point. Yeah, they're all doing exactly the same thing. Like I say, people think multiculturalism is a failure, and it is from our perspective, but not theirs. And that's what we've got to understand. They want to destroy our homogeneity. They want to break us down for this new digital authoritarianism. That is a term, by the way, if people don't know, where they're going to bring us in rootless people, easily ruled, easily manipulated. They have no base, no history, no sense of identity. They become the McDonald's, Starbucks, and I said this to you guys in private, because we were linking this a lot to Brave New World in our private chats, and it's how we're going to kind of angle the digital authoritarianism in our bigger production on that. But it's interesting that Huxley believed that it was going to be drugs that would be the soma, right? The thing that keeps you dumbed down. But actually, it's all in one here. It's the tech. I mean, just go outside your door, get on the train. I go on the train a lot when I'm allowed. I'm not allowed at the moment, but I get on the train a lot. And you can't have a conversation on the train anymore, because everybody's got their heads in their soma, addicted to their apps, right? They're addicted to their apps. They don't look up. So they've got it all in one. Here, download an app to track your movements, and it's also the drug that's keeping them interested. And sorry, I just went on a bit of a rant there, but anybody want to add anything there?
I think it's worth pointing out that it's kind of, well, like you say, it's all in one. Firstly, you've got, people with the petty distractions, whether it's video games or it's, TV or movies or whatever, and it's drugs as well. I mean, where I come from, most people smoke weed. Most people between the age of 18 and 35 don't do much of an evening after work or school, or depends how old they are, but whatever it is, after they're done doing what they do for the day, they go home, they smoke weed, they play video games, and they sit there for hours and hours and hours, and they're happy. Talking about Huxley, going back to, I think it was sort of the late 40s or early 50s or something like that. He said that willing slaves, they want to, you can do everything with bayonets, but sit on them,
Yeah.
and you need willing slaves, and that's exactly what they're creating with these drugs and with these petty distractions. And it looks very much as though that's what they wanted people to do. And when you look at the likes of marijuana, going back to MK Ultra and things like that in the US, back in the early days of all that, the first thing that they were trying, when they began all of those experiments into human psychology, was based on marijuana, which everybody smokes now. Everyone.
Yeah, it's massive. I know many people that do. I don't, but obviously, but yeah, it's a, and not just that. I mean, drugs when I was younger and they were seen as kind of extreme in my youth. If I don't visit pubs very often, but if I go back to my family and visit a friend in a pub, people are doing it. The old men are doing it. I don't know what's going on, man. Like drugs in general,
Yeah.
because it's escapism, petty distraction through the apps.
Yeah.
And we are,
suppose.
simple. What's that, Rhys? Sorry, carry on.
I was just gonna say, like, marijuana, especially, it pacifies people, makes them
Exactly.
inactive and not willing to fight.
Yeah, we've got so many problems going on, and this is, I mean, this is why, as Steve said, something that made us compelled to do this. We've got so many problems with people. We don't believe anyway. People are seeing the big picture here of what's going on. Everybody wants to fight their little corner, and sometimes, and people are too afraid to. I've spoken to a few people. People are afraid to even oppose government, even though they call themselves dissidents, in case they be called a libertarian. I mean, we've got ourselves worried, and I've seen this a lot. That if I say something, people go, "Well, he says that, and he's again, and we shouldn't be agreeing with that person," as if I'm supposed to make my opinions based on what somebody else said or take the opposite stance. Well, that's the easiest way to become the monkey while the other person plays the fiddle. Anybody else want to add anything there? Or?
Yeah, it's just
Well,
it's
yeah,
pigeonholing,
anything in
isn't it? Go on,
Yeah.
Rhys.
I was just gonna say, like, many of us feel like arseholes. We're being portrayed as these arsehole people because we, like, we care about our people and our nations, but they've done such a game on us with this one, where if we resist this tyranny now, we're just selfish assholes who want to get our grandmothers sick. It's just
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah. And Steve, what was you going to say? Sorry, mate.
No, nothing important. Nothing. Yeah, nothing, mate. Go on.
No, I'm good. I mean, I'm just trying to think if we've touched on so many subjects, and I apologise to the audience that, but we did want to keep it more relaxed and keep it just as a natural flow. But we have gone a lot over the place. But we are, as I said, and I keep saying this, we are going to make more concise videos on pretty much everything we're talking about here at some point in separate videos to put it out there better. But we wanted a more casual chat. So I'm just trying to think if there's anything we forget. Sorry, Eadric, carry on.
I was just going to say, I think when it comes to sort of making things feel more concise, it's worth pointing out that this conversation, it's hard to talk about this situation without going down a million different rabbit holes. And if that demonstrates one thing, it demonstrates that this situation is relevant. Again, going back to sort of nationalists and people interpreting this as if it's a good thing, you can't talk about this thing without going down a million rabbit holes. So it's worth pointing out that it ties into everything that we consider dangerous for us, our people, our well-being, our long-term health, our long-term everything. This ties into all of that. It's difficult to untangle and it's difficult to talk about it. And like you just said, you and Rhys are going to work on, further videos going forwards that are going to attempt to address things in a more concise manner. But the very fact that it's difficult to address it in a concise way is indicative that this is important, and it speaks about multiple different things. It's relevant to multiple different things.
And yeah, and we're always going to be on the back foot. They will always construct their argument in a manner which presents their ideas as the easiest to put forward. Like I was saying about that spike in deaths, it's very easy to show a graph with a big spike in it and go, look, COVID-19 is killing people. For me then to break that down, I have to look at that spike and look at every single number in that spike, what it's saying and what it's not saying, and then put that into a 5-10 minute video. We're always going to be at a disadvantage in explaining what they're doing because they always make their argument the easiest. Because why wouldn't you if you're framing the narrative, right? But yeah, so is there anything we've missed here tonight? Because obviously,
I'd just like to make the point that some of the big voices in the nationalist and dissident movements are saying, what harm can come from just waiting to see what really is the truth of all of this. But I'm proud, and I think we're all proud to be sticking our necks out on this one because, as I said before, when this so-called pandemic came out, it was a light bulb moment for me because lots of things that I've been researching for a long time, and as Eadric just said, it ties into absolutely everything. I mean, this is end game stuff, and it's absolutely vital that as many of us as possible come out and expose this now. And I see in a lot of comment sections under under the videos and the tweets by big voices in the scene, I see people who seem to have come to similar conclusions to us. So it's perplexing that those with the biggest voices seem to be either sitting on the fence or holding back or coming to completely the wrong conclusions. And it really is our duty to raise our voices at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and also for me, people saying that we have to wait for the fact. We've got a lot of stats, as we showed in the video. We made a half-hour video about the stats. We're making another video about the stats. Why? Because the stats, there's a lot there to talk about, and the argument that we have to wait and see is kind of lazy. It means you don't want to look at it. You're not actually a researcher. You're reactionary. You sit there. A lot of these talking heads have got so used to being given these stupid stories by media. They're attacking feminism, attacking all these things that are easy targets. I'm not saying they shouldn't be attacked, but they're easy targets. When you've got some blue-haired feminist saying some random nonsense, it's very easy to attack that. Or some ethnic minority calling for our destruction, it's very easy to attack that. But when you've got a complicated situation, a situation that takes a little bit of effort, I find it funny that a lot of these people suddenly sit on the fence.
It's important to say as well that it's not only a situation that takes a bit of effort to untangle and understand, it's a situation that very specifically plays on people's subconscious emotional fears. And also people want to be the best that they can be. If you've got, an authority telling you that if you don't do what we think you should do, then you're going to be putting lives in danger, the good person is going to bend to that because the good person does not want to put lives in danger. The question is, are those lives actually in danger? Are we being lied to? And if we're being lied to, why are we being lied to? And that's how, like Steed was saying just before, it all ties into end game stuff and what it is that they want to achieve long term.
Oh yeah, it's always message framing. That's what I was trying to say earlier. Message framing. Like, well, if you disagree, if you're wrong, you're going to cost millions of lives, right? You're the one that's wrong, and because of you being wrong, and that's how they scare you with everything. I do not vaccinate my children. And I can tell you that the scare tactics they used in that situation was constant. And I even questioned myself. I had to read and watch lectures over and over again to understand that I was coming from the right position. Because
exactly the same experience for me, Phil. Yeah.
Because they will scare you half to death to try and get you to break, right? To try and get you to go, well, what if? And this is about a little bit. It talks into what you were talking about, living and experiencing in our ancestors. Sorry. Comes down to personal responsibility. When somebody says to me they are unwilling, even if they believe it, even if they believe this COVID-19 to not be all it is said, they're unwilling to commit. They're unwilling to do the research or commit to a position because they're scared if they are wrong that they will then be, they worry that they will cost lives. And they are not free people. They are people that are telling me that they're too scared to take personal responsibility for their words and actions. And I mentioned the vaccines there because they're my children. If I make that wrong decision, the decision's on me. If I let the NHS make the decision's on them. I've got someone to blame and externalise my hate and my anger. If I make the decision, I've got no one to blame except myself. And people are too scared to make these decisions. They're too scared. As Eadric was pointing out, this is about the social conditioning where they put you in a position where you don't want to risk lives because people are, like I say, too scared to commit. Because if they commit and they are wrong, then they have to take responsibility for being wrong. And people do not want responsibility. And if we have that mentality, if everybody, when Boudica uprised, said, you know what, we could get this wrong, there'd be no uprising. But you could say, well, Boudica fell, so that was a good thing. But every single uprising, the Romans would still be in charge because nobody would ever challenge them just in case they failed. That's no excuse. And blaming people that push themselves, even if they fail, is also idiotic. We have to take a mentality that we will stand by our convictions. When we say we believe the government are genociding us, we mean it. That means we don't trust the government. We don't say the government are trying to genocide us 1 month, and then the next month go, well, if I'm wrong and I question the government here, it might cost lives. Well, that shows me that you're weak and pathetic, in my opinion. I mean, that's what I feel about that. You got to stick by your guns. If you believe that the government are trying to genocide you, then you cannot also hold the opinion that it's good that they're putting you in house arrest.
Yeah, not all forms of collectivism are equal.
No.
When people talk about how collectivism is good, yes, collective stupidity is not good. Collective bravery, collective responsibility, those are good things, and those are things we should strive for. People talk about European man being naturally collective, but if you look back at Anglo-Saxon England,
yes,
people generally were responsible for their own lives, their own families, their own communities. They didn't collectivize 100% of the time with the entire kingdom, but when it came time to call the Fyrd, then they heeded that call. They saw their sense of collective responsibility, but they didn't blindly follow collectively a bad leadership.
And also, I mean, even if we go back even further, Iron Age, where it was the tribes were very collectivized there, they still didn't accept oppression. The Cimbri were very collectivist, but they were willing to die rather than be ruled by another, essentially be put into slavery.
That's another thing. Sorry, mate. Can I just come in there because that's a really important point. Because when people talk about how we should be getting behind the state in this, we should be doing as they say because their job is to look after us, and we need to be with them on that. These people seem to be, especially nationalists, seem to be momentarily forgetting that those who comprise the state currently are essentially ideologically and in some ways literally foreign to us.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Like I was trying to say earlier, let's not revolt against Rome because Rome's probably got our best interest in us. They want us as wage slaves, right? They want us to keep their economy, but it gets into this very. People just cannot see that, like I said earlier, if you were a nationalist under communist rule, would you argue that the communists should have more power? Well, I've seen the same people that are saying we should follow this government call this government a communist government. I don't understand it. And some people in the chat there talking about what you were talking about earlier, Eadric, about the loneliness and of our elderly, and something I forgot to mention. And sorry for just jumping topics here a little bit, but something I saw footage of children with cancer and ill that couldn't see their parents. I mean, And we're saying that's going to help their recovery. And especially like we were saying with the old, it's just terrible. And sorry, that just reminded me with the comment that I saw there.
I think it is worth pointing that out, that the elderly, so the elderly people generally, are more lonely than young people. And when you've got this situation going on and people are all shut off in their homes, they've not got access to families and things like that. I think a week or two ago, one of my grandparents' neighbours fell down the stairs, and she wasn't seen by anybody for over 6-7 hours. And again, this can happen generally, but when you've got this situation where people are being told to stay at home and don't go out and all that, they're less likely to have a neighbour stop by and knock on their door. They're less
Oh, yeah.
likely to have family come by and see how they are and things like that. We've got old people at home on their own being told to self-isolate, and they could be in bad health anyway. Just because when you're elderly, there is a chance that you could be in bad health. That's quite frightening, and that in and of itself is a risk and a big danger.
Oh, a massive danger. And also people that want to reach out to their family that need some support are too scared to engage because they're told they might kill them. I mean, when you want to talk about psychological warfare, right? There's your granny. She's desperately lonely. She could do with some company. You can see that her health's deteriorating. But if you go there, even if you decide I'm going to break the rules and go there, they're also telling you that then you might kill her. Yeah. I mean, and if people believe that, and I'm not attacking them for believing that. I understand why they would believe that, the average person, because the news is pushing this down they're stuffing it down their throats every 5 minutes. But if people believe that, you've got to understand the psychological pressure there. And I know, because I've lost many older people, when they're at their end, they want to go home. They're not allowed to anymore. They're not allowed to go home and be with their family in their last moments. I mean, it's just disgusting all around. And when Steed, earlier you were talking about the sanctity of life and the meaning of life, and it being in some freedom, even in the collectivist freedom of your tribe, of your folk, to have that determination amongst yourselves. One of the freedoms, especially for an old person, should be how they die, and locked away. And also we're seeing the rise in DNRs, do not resuscitate, and things like this, which are disgusting. And I know that from personal experience, because my nana, she actually got out of hospital after this, but they actually put a DNR on her without our notice, which they can do, by the way. People don't realise.
Like you say, there's been a lot of that. I think it was about a week ago now. I mentioned this when we were sort of talking about the research for the video that was put up a few days ago. My girlfriend, hers, has been in hospital for some time now, with what's it called, shut-in disorder, I think it's called. And he was told firstly they need to move him to a different hospital, and they need to move him to a different hospital because they need to make room, apparently, for people who've got coronavirus. Even though, bear in mind, when you look at London, this is not someone based in London, by the way, but when you look at London, which is apparently the worst hit part of the UK, ICU units are not exceeding about 80% capacity. Nevertheless, they were told that they need to be moved to a different hospital from where they were initially, in order to make room for coronavirus patients. They then got to the hospital they were moved to. The day they got to that hospital, they were told that they are showing symptoms of coronavirus and maybe a coronavirus patient. And then the very next day, they were shipped back to the first hospital they came from. This is someone with shut-in disorder. Now, again, this is not a story that I can verify. It's just what I've been told. So I would take that, with a pinch of salt. But nevertheless, that's quite a frightening prospect. And there's a lot of stories about this kind of thing. And when you look at, for example, people in care homes and the kind of stories that are coming out about people in care homes, it's all very strange.
Oh yeah, and there's somebody mentioned in the chat there, a friend of mine, that hospitals in the US are being financially incentivized for having COVID patients. As Rhys put a great little clip in our documentary too, where he pointed that out, where there was a doctor there explaining these incentivized measures where they're getting money. If you suddenly diagnose that person with COVID, the government, out of that $2.2 trillion, which is an absolute insane amount, as I mentioned in the video, and I'm going to stress it again, that is $2,200 billion. Okay? Out of that, they're incentive, so they're essentially financially incentivizing you putting COVID-19 on the death certificate, or even saying they're suspected of it because you suddenly get more money. And are you going to trust people? When money gets involved, everything gets corrupt, right? And you can even see how good people might even do this. There could be a guy at a hospital that wants funding for a new ward and goes, you know what? We just say these people have got COVID. We get this money, and then we can build that new ward. We can get those baby incubators that we need. So you can even see how good people could go along with this. It's not everybody's corrupt. It's good people seeing a chance to do something good out of a bad situation. But from our perspective, it shows how easily it is to manipulate these numbers. Does anybody want to add anything there?
No, I think that's a really good point, because people will say, well, how could something like this, I'm not going to call it a hoax, but I'm going to something which is clearly questionable in terms of the statistics. How could something like that be carried off on such an enormous scale? Well, I mean, firstly, as you just said, good people can often find ways of justifying their actions, and secondly, we know that the bigger the lie, the harder it is to believe. Which is another factor. But I mean, there's so many directions we could go in this. But I think a few people in the chat have mentioned, what they're doing through all of this, and what can be done, and how we should react to this. And I wonder if it might be worth making some suggestions as to what we can individually do and do collectively about this situation.
Well, yeah, I'd just like to, as I've just been told in the chat, that financial incentive is only for people who don't pay their own insurance, which I'm going to assume are people that are hard to get money from. So I'm assuming that's the incentive there. But just to clarify that, but because we've been going a little bit now. 1 sec, I'll just check. For an hour and 37. So yeah, we could round it up nicely with a bit of advice. So do you want to start us there, Steed?
Well, yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say, there are various videos out there that, an increasing number all the time, which have got really great information. The video we made, mostly yourself and Rhys, obviously, but the video that we helped to make is really well cited. It's very well researched. The normies, in inverted commas, that I've shown it to have been really impressed with it. They've not found anything in it which seems unreliable or suspicious. So we should be sharing that around with people, and I think we all need to find a bit of backbone in this and not be afraid to step out of line here, because as far as I'm concerned, this really is the future of our culture, essentially, and our folk that is under threat here. It's that serious as far as I'm concerned, and future videos that Mimir's council will be doing will be highlighting just how serious a threat this all is, and tying everything in together. So I think we need to find that bravery to stick our head above the parapet and speak out about this, or at least question it, and make sure that the people around us are questioning it as well. Beyond that, the only thing I would suggest is start to get used to going out without your mobile phone, because in all of the research we're doing, we're seeing how central the smartphone is to all of the plans that they have. It's something that I've foreseen for a long time, which is why I've always avoided carrying a smartphone myself.
Same here.
Yeah, I know you don't either, Phil. So I just think, I understand how convenient they are. A lot of people need them for work and whatever. No judgment here, but at this point, surely we can at least go for a walk or to the shop, or visiting someone when we're allowed to again, without taking our phone with us. And if we can all get out of the habit of having it glued to us at all times, that will seriously hamper the plans that some very sketchy people have for us.
Yeah, I think it's worth pointing out. you don't need your phone with you at all times. It's probably worth considering getting rid of your phone at this point. I do have a smartphone. I'm going to be getting a dumb phone and making a lot more use of that going forwards, because if there was ever a time in which you get confirmation that the things that you've thought about or considered or whatever in the past regarding the way in which things are going, as far as tech is concerned, and all the rest of that, and surveillance, as enabled by tech, it's this. This is the moment, in my opinion. If these vaccinations come, don't accept it. If these, if they try to do the mandatory testing and all that, don't accept it. If they try to do mandatory, what's it called, tracking apps and things like that, don't accept them. If it comes down to getting rid of your phone, do it. In my opinion, if we're gonna make a stand, I think now's the time to do it. We've been, going back years, we've all been watching as things have got, realistically speaking, worse and worse. This has been, in my opinion, a very rapid act of acceleration, and we need to consider what we can do going forwards to kind of counter it. Again, in my opinion, if there's time to act, it's now. I've in the past, I've not done anything, and I feel like I should do something about what's going on. In my opinion, what's going on now, it's the time to do it.
No, good points there. And Rhys, have you got anything you wish to add here? Anything at all? And you can.
Yeah, I just think it's probably about mass disobedience, and we're going to have the courage to just say no to these apps and these digital IDs and just refuse and just hope enough people get on board. Because I think a lot of people do see something's not right, even if they're not fully on board with our views or whatever. There's a lot of people who are questioning it.
No, I agree. And as I said, Steed, I don't have a mobile phone. I had to get one actually to reinstate our Mimers Borough and Mimers Council Twitter accounts, but I don't use it for anything other than that. And I would agree with that. And I'd agree with there has to be some type of civil disobedience at certain points, especially with mandatory. They're going to make it difficult for you. We would believe that in the future with these apps, they're going to make it very difficult for you.
That's the thing. It's they're going to put it. They're going to sell it to us in terms of convenience, and a lot of people do get sucked into the need for, or the the apparent need for convenience.
Mhm.
So I think we need to make peace with inconvenience.
Yes.
To put it bluntly, all of us need to value our dignity more than we value convenience.
Well, we've got a perfect time to learn some skills that we could circumvent inconvenience. Maybe if instead of using the hand drill, right, you decide to learn a little bit of woodwork. At the moment, if you're stuck at home, why not? And also appreciate your family. If you've got to, if you're somebody that has to work many hours and you can't work at the moment, you're not allowed to work because your business. Take that time to appreciate at least. Try and get something out of a bad situation as well. But I do believe, as everybody said here, that it is going to come down to civil disobedience, and that could just be as much as not taking the app. Even if they say if you don't take the app, you can't go outside, or etc. I don't think it's going to be quite that simply straightforward. But you get what I'm trying to say.
I think when it comes to things like that, what we do need to be concerned about is that everybody's being told, if possible, to work at home at the moment, at least in the UK. This allows them to introduce those kinds of apps in a kind of soft enforcement kind of way. For example, you can't work at home forever. We're trying to, loosen the restrictions. We want you back in the office.
Yeah.
However, we're not going to let you back to the office until you've got that app.
Yeah, it'd be
They don't have
corporate
to rely
enforced. Yeah.
Yeah, corporate enforced, exactly. They don't need to rely on the government to do that. And
No.
as Steed was saying a moment ago, I think it is worth keeping in mind as well that any kind of civil disobedience that we do enact going forward will not be easy. They're going to make
No.
sure that it's hard, but the more of us that are willing to disobey, the easier it'll be for something to come of that disobedience. So I would say, again, when they do begin to talk about what they're going to do with their exit strategies, as they keep putting it, it's worth keeping in mind that even if it is difficult, the more of us that do it, the more likely it is that we're going to, make some progress in trying to counteract what could be coming up because of
if you look at some of those protests, like in Michigan, the mainstream media is clearly trying to make them look like idiots. Just showing
Yeah.
stupid photos. Just getting this most stupid line from certain people, being really selective of how they portray them, and just completely making them look like just clueless. Just buffoons who just love Trump, but associating them with Trump and all that. And it's just there's clearly they don't want protests like that, and they're just doing everything they can to just make them look like idiots.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anything specifically about that protest, who's behind it, who's running it, but if we start mocking people for, I've always found it funny, even when we mock the left for protesting, they go, look at these idiots all out doing it, and I'm like, well, where are our idiots? Where are we? Right? If they're so idiots, why are they out there doing something? So I've never, we're not doing anything. And that's been actually a lot within our circles. They're very easy to mock others, but very little do themselves. So these guys are out there protesting that they should be allowed outside of their house when they decide, and I don't disagree with them. So I think I support it in that sense. But yeah, the media will. And one point we haven't done, and I haven't brought it up, but I have heard it mentioned before, is this Q stuff, as if somehow, because I disagree with the numbers, because we here have done our research, because we have looked at these numbers, somehow we're agreeing with this Q crap that I've got that just looks like a bunch of nonsense to me. Again, it talks into something that if you agree with this, then you agree with them kind of argument, but I don't know if anybody else has got anything to add on that.
Oh, when it comes to the stuff about Q and all that, I don't really know much about it, because when I look at all that Q, what's going on here, and I don't really untangle it because I've not followed it since the beginning. The only thing I really know is that they keep making these predictions, or Q makes these predictions or whatever, that just never ever seem to come to fruition. But one of the things that I did notice when it come to all of this is that they were talking about Oprah Winfrey, and how like Oprah Winfrey's a pedo or something like that, and whatever, she may well be, for all I know. A lot of them are. However, they were saying that they're using this situation to try and round up all the pedos and all whatever else in sort of government and celebrity and all that. But she's performing on that whole one world together at home thing, so that's obviously bullshit. And
yeah. I think it's just that I have seen people saying that, like, because I think this now, I'm suddenly agreeing with this Q crap. I mean, but this again is that black and white mentality where people are just like, it's this or that, and I can't think outside of that box, and that causes the mental schisms, that causes the double think, actually, when you can't think outside of certain argument. But
this comes into like the left wing and the right wing, doesn't it? Because
same thing.
They're constantly trying to push this. Everything's a dichotomy, and there's never any alternative perspective in which you could look at things. And they use emotion in order to dichotomy as well. It's insidious.
Yes, Steed, you wanted to say something there?
Yeah, the Q thing. I mean, my observation on that, I didn't know much about it before. I mean, I vaguely heard about it when it came out and immediately knew it was bullshit. But when I started to mention to a few, more along the kind of normie, line of things, people that I know, when I started to mention my suspicions surrounding this coronavirus thing, quite a few of them came back to me pretty quickly with QAnon videos saying, what do you think of this? And I was like, well, obviously those videos are being somehow artificially promoted at this exact moment in time. And I just thought that was incredibly convenient. To me, that's just more proof that it's a load of rubbish.
Yeah, I agree. And somebody actually brought up 5G towers in relation to this, and they're pushing the some of the stuff with that. But one thing that I want to talk about 5G, just briefly, whatever you think about the radiation or anything like that, to implement a full Internet of Things, a smart city, you need something like 5G. 4G is not good enough. You need 5G. So people are missing, people are attacking something like 5G, but they're missing the point of what it could be used for, and that's to bring in a smart city, Internet of Things type world. And I always find that funny, and that's a lot of things. Sometimes they put out these stories to distract you, and stories that they can easily debunk or attack, when actually what 5G towers actually do is essential for a smart city to operate. Just to show this, China is now, although it started a little bit later with 5G than everybody else, is putting, in 1 month it put up something like 50,000 5G towers so they can extend their smart city Internet of Things technology or digital authoritarianism. And sorry to just go on for a rant there, but
I think it's worth pointing out that there is some chance, and I mean, I don't know about 5G and its sort of negative health effects and things like that. There's all kinds of speculation about what kind of bad things 5G could do for your health, and I don't really know about that. The only thing that I can say about 5G is that as far as digital ID and all those kinds of things are concerned, it does look as though that is what they're pushing to implement. 5G would be necessary infrastructure, like you say. And as a consequence of that, it could well be the case that there are people who are pushing this idea that it's bad for your health, which it might well be. But there are people pushing this idea in order to say, oh, these conspiracy theorists or whatever who are concerned about 5G, they're worried that it's going to make their skin coils fall apart, or I don't know, whatever. It feels like they can use that as a weapon against people. Really, the point is 5G is necessary, and they want to distract people who could be critical of its introduction.
Yeah, because when 5G gets fully rolled out everywhere and people's brains don't automatically turn to mush, all of the kind of the people that generally mock conspiracy theorists are going to be able to turn around and point and laugh at them and say, "So you were talking nonsense about that. You're talking nonsense about everything else." So yeah, no, I agree. We shouldn't be pushing this idea that 5G is the worst thing about it is the health threats. It may have some health implications, but would they really be rolling it out if it was that much of a threat to their cattle, which is how they think of us?
Well, it may have health implications, but most people carry a mobile phone on them, which has serious health implications. There's massive studies of that if you put it close to your head, especially in a stress scenario.
Never mind, carry a phone around.
They put
Sorry,
carry
to
on. Sorry,
interrupt.
Adrian.
Yeah, sorry, just a quick one. I was going to say, never mind, carry it. People sleep with their phone next to their head all night. People have their phone on their pillow, under their pillow, whatever, next to them all night. And then on top of that, like you say, they're in their pocket all day, every day.
So the problem is when you get the argument that I don't want the radiation, but you're carrying a phone around all the time, they'll make the argument. And I don't know the exact stats on that. It's something that I should look into, and I will get round to it. But like we said, we know that for their system to work, they need 5G. The Internet of Things is so vast now that without it, you can't operate. There's so many things to be brought together. Could it make some kind of symptoms? Could it make you ill? Possibly. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to look. But so, is there anything else that people want to end on here before we call it a night? I think because it's getting quite late now. It's nearly 12 o'clock here in the UK.
I mean, there are so many things there's so many avenues we could go down, and perhaps we will in future streams. But I think for tonight, that's great.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
You, Rhys?
I think that's everything that I can think of at the top of my head right now.
All right. Well, then, thanks for joining us, everybody. Without you guys listening, there wouldn't be any point. We hope to have a few more coming soon, so I hope you tune in then. And thanks for the great comments. Because there was 4 people, I had a better chance to look at them, which was good for me than normally on my streams. Well, good night, folks, and thanks everybody for joining me. And good night to you guys listening out there. And we'll catch you next time. Be well.
Cheers. Thanks for listening. Be well.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.